Hey Toycat, I don't know if you could, but can you do a video about this? Very recently, when the Minecraft launcher was updated, people found a piece of code that meant the game was going to be giving free capes to all accounts, but each cape will be different depending on how old your account is. And this, if you don't know, is referring to the idea of veteran capes. This is something that was found recently. This is the code from the translation page that says, and a special veteran cape for each year you've played Minecraft Java Edition. And as you can see, very strongly implying that we're going to get veteran capes with a different one for each year you've been playing Minecraft. There'll be a 2010 veteran cape, 2011, 2012, etc, all the way through 2020. This is something I think is actually a really great idea, especially since Minecon just doesn't exist as a concept anymore. Why not just reward people for having really old accounts, which is effectively what the Minecon capes were. I think this is a great idea. However, every single time this rumor crosses my paths, I look into it, and all I can find is this single video from this single YouTuber who shows this single screenshot, the one you've already seen, and that is supposedly from the Minecraft translations page. But even if we assume they're telling the truth and that just for some reason no one else has found this, but the truth of the matter is just because there is some code on the website on one of the pages, it doesn't mean it's a confirmed feature by any stretch of the imagination. Instead, it kind of confirms that at some point they were intending to do this. I mean, they clearly wrote out a whole thing about it. If this is true, which is a big if because it's only one YouTuber, but even if it is true, then you have to go under the assumption that at some point they were planning this, but clearly not too recently. Again, people go under the assumption that they're planning this and they're trying to keep it secret and they just forgot to remove this one trace. But what is actually way more likely is that they were planning this previously and then they just forgot to remove this last little trace from this one page that most people aren't checking anyway. And the kind of proof behind that is we've already heard a cape announcement to do with the Minecraft migration. If you don't know, Java is switching to Microsoft accounts, and as a way to encourage people, there is a brand new cape every single player will be getting, and presumably that's the more kind of egalitarian approach to the whole veteran cape. I would love to see veteran capes. I think it's a really great idea. I just don't think it's real from this single bit of code, and instead it's just the start of a conversation about whether we should do that and a tiny chance of us possibly getting it when the account migration happens in 2021. But yeah, hello, I'm Toycat. Welcome back to QnA Saturday. This is the weekly series where I answer your questions about all sorts of things Minecraft, and I think it's important to have a grounded kind of take on all these sorts of things. Just because you want to believe something is true, it doesn't mean it is true, and when I speculate, I like to be very clear about that, unlike the approach that some YouTubers seem to take with their videos. But with that said, let's go to a little bit of follow-up from last week's questions, because Th43 says, isn't the whole thing with the Nether that you can't do anything normal? Clocks don't work, compasses don't work, and when you try to sleep, you spontaneously combust. It feels like not being able to make a map would fit right in, and this is in response to the idea of cave maps potentially working in the Nether and giving a way to map out the Nether. I totally agree. The Nether is meant to be the place where nothing works by default. Clocks are goofy, compasses are goofy, and sleeping results in immediate death, or trying to avoid fools by having a bed down there also results in immediate death. It's terrible, but the Nether update showed that they're not interested in just making the Nether inhospitable, they just want to make it differently hospitable. And that's why I think, sleeping, instead of using a bed, you can use a respawn anchor. Instead of using a compass, you have to kind of work off directional things that you see in the Nether themselves, or you can even use a beacon, because that's specifically modified to work in the Nether, because it can go through Bedrock in that dimension. So I personally think having a cave map that could work at a specific layer in the overworld, and therefore a specific layer in the Nether, wouldn't be too OP, because the funny thing is even if you could make a specific layer map for the Nether, it's still going to be mostly red, or mostly blue, or mostly grey, depending on the biome, and that's why I think it's a fair balance, is that you have to kind of make the map worthwhile yourself. It's much harder than an overworld map, which makes itself very clear immediately. But with that said, let's move into the second bit of follow-up, because Gentle Brut says, in response to the whole speedrunning controversy about, like, you know what, if there's too much RNG in 1.16, why don't we remove ender pearls from trades? All endermen and blazes can drop one pearl/rod respectively. Problem solved, maybe. And yeah, and although this is a reasonable solution, I mean, hypothetically, if there was a big YouTuber who dreamed of being the best player in the world, and maybe they cheated as a way of doing so, and you could avoid having that by obviously having a perfect RNG removal from the game. Every single time you kill an enderman, you get a pearl. Every single time you kill a blaze, you get a blaze rod. But that's also kind of not how Minecraft works fundamentally. I think having a little bit of RNG is a key part of Minecraft's game design, because it's not bad game design to have speedruns utilize RNG. Sure, it means that the very top level is always going to have some very good RNG, some very good potential drops, but it also means that there is a little bit of skill involved in thinking, okay, there's one blaze between me and my Nether portal. If I go towards it and I've got a 50-50 chance of getting that blaze rod, I can seriously screw myself if this goes badly, but I can also be in serious luck if this goes well. Being able to take risks that are informed in a good way is pretty great for most of Minecraft. It's just the problem is that trading isn't informed risk. Trading is just, again, rolling, the roulette table. There's no risk unless you're in a bastion and there's piglin brutes, and that is where the problem comes from. You're just sitting there, no risk taking, just entirely at the whims of a random number generator, and that is the bigger part of the problem, because I think having rare drops, having common drops, having 50-50 drops is kind of fine. I'd like to see more accessible ways to alter those, like if you kill the critical hit, maybe you should have a 60% chance instead of 50. I think stuff like that is a much better idea than just saying every single time you kill an enderman, you get a pearl, because having things be guaranteed isn't as fun and interesting as having them be risks, because risks are what make good speedruns interesting to watch, in my opinion. With that out of the way, let's take a risk and answer Deadly's comment here, because they say, I don't know about all of you, but I think the dripstone biome was amazing in the smaller caves, and this is a fair response. I mean, when you see those small cave dripstone biomes, you might think, why do we even need bigger ones? But then I will show you in response to that, Henrik Nieberg, who's doing most of the heavy lifting with the caves, he posted just yesterday, lol, this geode generated inside a large stalactite. So first of all, let's just appreciate that this stalactite is so big that it can have a geode inside of it. Second of all, let's appreciate how cool this is and how much I want the seed, because I love seeing wacky things like this. And third of all, let's appreciate just how pretty this cave is. Again, here's the zoomed in version. Look at this thing, look at the background, and see how giant and massive and pretty this thing is when you start looking at the background. This is a much better looking biome, much more fascinating to explore in my opinion. I think you need to have small and medium variants as well, but I think the big caves are going to be the moments where we go, wow, this is 1.17. This is the cave update we dreamed of for all those years. It has been worth the years of campaigning, because look at this. And just in case you're curious about why is this cave so flat, this looks kind of different to other caves you might have spotted, Henrik Nieberg responded saying, never mind the weird cave shape behind. Did a temporary parking garage style cave generation just to test some things with the dripstone. Are you talking about the flat floor, Son says? And he says, yeah, the flat floor and the flat ceiling in all directions was doing some tweaking for some things and made a flat cave. And it's kind of crazy that he could just make a flat cave to test a few things out. But also, isn't there a part of you that enjoys this, like as a rare feature? I mean, obviously there has to be some texture to the ground, but this parking style cave seems like a fun super flat design or something like that. All I'm saying right here is that if this isn't a part of vanilla Minecraft, I'm gonna make something in from it. So with that said, let's move into the next question, which is a direct follow-up from Parker is Epic. And you know what, with a picture like that and the grammar of a question like, hey, do they fix the nether caves too? I question, is this ironic, or like, is he really epic and that's just what an epic face looks like? You know, I'm not going to question it. I'm not going to question the fact that the set question doesn't have a very clear syntax and also is missing all the grammatical points, although it does have a capital H, so we can say nice one there, Parker's Epic. Anyway, so they are Epic and they're asking about nether caves, and are they going to fix those up? I mean, we're changing caves in the overworld. It only makes sense that we'll change caves in the nether, and the sad answer is most likely not. I mean, to me, the way I interpret caves and cliffs is that nether caves should get a little bit of a tune-up, but we haven't seen anything that indicates that is what they intend to do. But I would like to see some parity fixes to make the caves more interesting and more similar across versions. Right now, there's some really cool features only on Bedrock as far as nether caves, you know, those like at-floor caves of the biomes poking through them, and there's also those giant ravines which are only on Java. Why can't we have both those features synced across both? Why can't we have exclusive cave structures for the nether? Or at the very least, can we have one exclusive cave biome for the nether? Is that so much to ask for? And the answer is maybe, potentially it is. But we'll have to wait and see until it releases in summer 2021. But you know, it's not releasing in summer 2021. This comment from L. Question: what are your thoughts on virtually useless features like poison potatoes, the bane of arthropods enchantment, wandering traders, etc.? Do you think they should be removed or given actual purposes or left as is? My honest thought is removing poisonous potatoes doesn't benefit anyone. Admittedly, adding poisonous potatoes didn't really benefit anyone and just made the game a little bit more confusing. But I think rather than removing these features, you should, because if you remove a feature like that, you either leave a lot of players who have poisonous potatoes with this item that now is going to vanish from their world, or more realistically, you stop them being able to get it in future, so you have an item that has to remain in creative only, and it weirds people out. It's kind of like the rubies. People are still insistent that rubies are going to come into Minecraft and be a huge thing, even though they were just emeralds, but Dinnerbone's colorblind, so we couldn't put them in. The theories that come from these weird kind of underused items are always going to be huge, but even ignoring that, because I think theory crafting can be fun, but what isn't fun is the idea of just being like, yeah, let's just give up on a feature. I think what is much more fun is being giving them an actual purpose. So wandering traders, give them the ability to, like sell directions to various biomes, or give them the ability to sell a bundle of like random blocks, like a little bit of an RNG, thing, and it costs an emerald. Who knows what you'll get? Sometimes you can get some fun building blocks, and that could be actually a farmable way to get certain blocks without having to just mine endlessly and mindlessly. That would be fun, right? If you take Bane of Arthropods and make it good against like the Ender Dragon. You know what? Are Ender Dragons arthropods? There's no biologists who can, would it be a naturologist? Zoologist. There's no zoologist who can contradict that because they can just make it look more like a bug. I think, there's all these tiny changes they could make to just make things a little bit more useful. The hoe is a great example of this. The hoe was mostly useless outside of farming, and why would you ever want a diamond or a netherite hoe? You wouldn't, except 1.16 was clever, and they gave a few more uses for the hoes. They gave it the ability to break hay bales faster, and leaves faster, and never warp blocks faster, and as a result, a hoe is an actual part of your arsenal. Not the most useful. It's never going to be as useful as a sword or a pickaxe, but they made it more useful, and they finally gave you a real purpose to actually want to have an enchanted netherite hoe, which sounds dumb, but is cool. I think every feature can have these tiny tweaks to them to give them some real use, or if they have some tiny fractional use, give them a little bit more. I think that's how you can make Minecraft a much better game, both taking new content and making it from scratch, but also making your existing content much more interesting. So next up here, we've got Alternate Account, who says, are we ever getting these snapshot features in the Bedrock beta? They're really leaving us hanging. So Mr. Alternate Account, I would like to respond. First of all, thank you for being subscribed for a long amount of time. You can see from that little red badge that you've been there for a while. Thank you for that, and I appreciate you. But you know what I don't appreciate? The fact that snapshots and betas have this really weird disparity gap between them, where some updates, I think 1.13 and 1.16 had some really big moments where obviously the Bedrock version was way ahead of Java, and where that's true. And then there's some updates where the Java version is just always ahead of the Bedrock one. It's kind of confusing to watch and follow, and it's especially confusing because there are a few features added to the Bedrock betas, like the new fish eggs, that they just decided to not keep, and they reverted them to being kind of boring and uniform. Stuff like that, where it's like, why? The development process, I can't tell you what's happening. I can't tell you why there's this prioritization where everything happens week by week on Java, and then like a couple months later on Bedrock right now. But I can just tell you that the Bedrock beta phase is hopefully starting real soon. We saw Connor Hard MC a couple of weeks ago kind of just hint that like something's coming, maybe soon. I would guess now that it is the 19th of December that it's probably going to be closer to 2021, because we've seen a brand new snapshot for new goats, we've seen a brand new snapshot for more powdery snow stuff, but as far as brand new fresh features and all the axolotls and stuff like that, I think you're gonna have to be waiting a little bit longer. Speaking of things you're gonna have to wait a little bit longer for, my dignity to return after I answer this next question, because Quinn Battaglia says, can anyone explain the cheat flag? Is it a Bedrock thing? And I know it's crazy, about half the people who watch my channel don't play Bedrock, and first of all, thank you for watching the videos. Is it confusing looking at this Bedrock gameplay in the background? But second of all, allow me to actually explain this. So this is Minecraft Java Edition. It's independent of all the other platforms, including Steam, as the title text will remind you. And as a result of that, the way cheats work on this version is you load up a world and you decide, am I going to allow cheats on or off? You can actually have a creative world where cheats are turned off as well, which is really interesting in my opinion, that you can like fix a world in that way. Obviously the one exception to this is if you want to have hardcore difficulty, you have to have cheats turned off. And the only exception to this is if you want to have hardcore difficulty, cheats have to be turned off, because cheats is turned off by default, and so is your difficulty locked on hard. These are pretty much the only rules. So on Java, people don't really understand the idea of a cheat flag, but obviously if you play the Bedrock version of Minecraft, or just Minecraft as it's called, if your Minecraft just says Minecraft at the top, you're playing Bedrock. Now we know there's always a tiny bit of confusing there. When you create a new world, you can see that anything that you do, it's kind of fine. Starting map, fine. Bonus chest, those are preferences. But any of the options found under this Activate Cheats button will obviously enable cheats in your world. And here's the crazy thing. Even if you turn it on for just a second, even if you just toggle the switch for a second, that world, forever onwards, will no longer have achievements be earnable. This is obviously because of achievement rules to do with Xbox Live. Every Minecraft Bedrock version is tied into Xbox Live and the achievement system, with the exception being Minecraft PlayStation, of course, which has trophies. But every single other version is tied into the achievement system, and that means that if you, let's try this again. If you set your world to creative even for a second, then you'll never be able to earn achievements because the creative flag is set to on, and there is no legitimate way to turn off that achievement flag. There's a widely used glitch on Java that means you can like kind of use creative temporarily by opening your world to LAN, and it's been available for many years now, and people abuse it, and what does it matter? You're only cheating yourself. But because of the very public nature of Xbox Live achievements, it's considered a very important thing that they keep most exploits from working. So if you want to play a legit survival world, it has to stay in legit survival, and the downside to this is if you don't have cheats enabled. So let's try one more time. Then when you load up your world and you find out fun facts like there's 3,587 types of fish, but when you go to your world and you're like, oh, I really hate phantoms, I'm just going to turn that game rule off, right? Because who wants it? So you're like, okay, I'll go to /game rule, and then you realize that you can't change your game rules from within the game because cheats are not enabled. The only ones you can do are like fire, and there's a few game rules you can do, but they have to be done via the options menu. Cheats or commands, for the most part, are not available without having cheats enabled, and when you enable those cheats, even just for a second, even if you just want to immediately turn them back off, again, your world is forever tainted with the lack of achievements. And given that that's basically a way of testing if something's legit or not, obviously if you want to fake a real world and pretend you can obviously change the flag in the set. There are ways to do it, always technically speaking, because you can modify your own game as much as you like. However, it means that most players are pretty proud of their having achievements on status, because it means their whole world was done in legitimate survival, or at least that's the message they're trying to portray, and it's most likely that it is true. So yeah, that is why people are very concerned that, like, for instance, like do Insomnia. Oh, I'll just turn off do Insomnia. Oh, doesn't work because I'd have to turn on cheats to do that first. And yeah, as a result, people are really upset when there's a feature they really want that's locked behind the cheat wall. I can understand why do Insomnia would be turned off, but the sleeping in beds thing is just a multiplayer ease of use rule that people really don't want to have activate the cheat flag. So now you understand. Let's go back. And let's finish with the final question from Owen Hardy. How old is Toycat, if you don't mind me asking? Never mind that, he can't drive. I'm not here to make fun, but do people not need to drive in England? So first of all, I live in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Thank you very much, Owen. But second of all, yeah, it seems weird to a lot of Americans I speak to that are like, wait, you don't drive places? But how do you get from where you are to like a different place? Like, how does that work? And I have to explain that, like, well, anything that's within a reasonable distance you can walk to. Like, like if a 20-minute drive versus a 20-minute walk, a 20-minute walk is so much preferable because you're not getting in a vehicle, waiting in traffic, blah, 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 like to me at least. But also if it's long distance, then it's generally going to be much, much slower to drive if you live on a high-speed train line. So, for instance, if you live in the very south coast of the UK, getting from there to London will take you about 40 to 45 minutes on the train, and obviously if you want to drive it, it's going to take like 2 to 2.5 hours. It is genuinely much slower to drive, and therefore, and maybe an interesting stereotype if you're American and it's like, only losers and poor people don't drive the cars because cars are good for everyone. Obviously in the UK it's like, oh yeah, you catch the train, and if you can't afford the train, then you drive. But it's slower and like less convenient, etc., etc. Our cities are not built for cars because they're much, much older, and that is why I'm only learning to drive this year, because the only time I'd ever drive a car is a rental car. You generally speaking can't rent a car if you're under 25. I know there's exceptions to that, but it's expensive. But now I'm 25, it's like, okay, I'm gonna learn to drive. If I'm gonna be in America, it's kind of essential, and so I'm basically learning to drive just so I can rent a car in America or like other rural places where it makes sense to have a vehicle of your own regard, because there's no train lines or buses or really anything, and walking doesn't make sense because it's such a big darn country, huh? And since I'm British / European / whatever, I get to use this opportunity to lecture some Americans. Yeah, this is the best thing. You ever think about how weird it is that it's just normal that every single person, with very few exceptions in the country, are like, yeah, I have to learn to drive this thing because otherwise I can't function as a member of this society. Oh, and what does driving entail? It entails being in this giant metal box. By the way, this metal box, if it hits a person, they die very, very badly. If it hits another metal box, maybe they die and maybe I die too. And also at any point in time, if someone else drives their big metal box wrong, even if I'm driving perfectly, I'm gonna die. And also most people, like they'll admit to like doing a little bit of texting while driving or a little bit of distracted driving. You're thinking too hard or you're tired, and it's like, oh yeah, so you admit to non-stop just, you know, like almost killing people because you're kind of tired and lazy. You know, it's crazy. It's interesting to think about, but that is the situation in anywhere that's rural enough to have cars be the primary form of transport. And maybe you find that interesting, or maybe you think I'm a smug European. You know what? It's definitely that I'm a smug city-dwelling person that thinks that just because I use my legs to get around that I'm superior. Like, what's wrong? You think you're too good for your wheels? Why aren't you using wheels, Toy Cat? I mean, we all play Minecraft with wheels. Like, seriously, okay, you know what? Most people play with view bobbing turned off, and I just want to say how weird that is. Like, it's like you're rolling around on wheels, and it's like, clearly, most people would prefer if they had wheels in their own body. But me, personally, I'm used to view bobbing because that's how it is when you walk from a place to another place. You know what? Why is walking weird? Why is using your own body the weird one? Shouldn't it be weird to jump in the big steel car and to go places and to just like hope that you don't die, even though you know 30,000 people a year in your country alone are getting into accidents, and a lot of those are fatal, and everyone knows someone who's gone into some form of car accident, but they're like, it totally won't happen to me. It's like that. Imagine if you had that attitude towards anything else, and you don't have to because it's 2020, am I right? Boom. Thank you for watching this video. Hope you all enjoyed, because I'll see you all in the next one, or I won't if I get into a car accident, because even as a pedestrian, those cars can veer into me, and I can be dead. So I'll see you all if I don't die in a tragic car accident or house fire, and I'll see you then. Goodbye.